Hello, we are here today with Dr. Doris van Halem, Associate Professor at TU Delft and Scientific Director of the Global Drinking Water Program. Thank you very much for being here today.
Nice to meet you, Diana.
Nice to meet you. I would like to ask you a few questions so you can share your expertise with the community. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So my first question is, would you please walk me through the importance of sanitation and water in the developing countries?
Yeah. So if we look, for example, at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal 6 is fully focused on access to water and sanitation. And at this moment, about 30% of the people do not have access to safely managed drinking water, which means drinking water that is safe to drink. And 60% of people don't have access to safely managed sanitation. In this context, particularly the girls and the women are affected because 80% more or less is responsible for collecting water in a household, in these households that don't have access.
That's a very high percentage.
It is, yes, yeah.
Could you please explain me what is the relation between clean, safe water and right to education, human rights maybe in general?
Yeah. So you can imagine if you don't have access to safe water, then waterborne diseases are common practice, so exposure to pathogens in the water. And when you're sick, you don't function well, but when you're sick, you might also not be able to go to school. But even when you're not sick, and as a child you have to collect water, that might be more important than going to school. Which means that because of having no water, there's a lack of education and economic potential within the household.
That is true. How do you think this problem could be solved, this water crisis that we are facing?
That's a really big question. Yeah? So I think if I had to answer here, then the problem might be solved. I think there's so many aspects to this problem, from a governance perspective, institutional perspective, but definitely also from a technology perspective. I think having access to good technologies to treat water or to have a toilet in-house, I think is still a problem, which is partially organizational reason, partially economic reason. But I do believe if the will is there, it is possible to solve this crisis as humanity, but it does take a lot of effort and collaboration, which is not always there now.
Yeah. True. How do you ensure that you have a sustainable practice in this field of improvement of water?
Well, I'm a very strong believer in end-user participation. So we mainly do research projects, some educational projects, and I think co-creation and true collaboration with local partners is crucial, and preferably initiatives with the local partner as well. But that is honestly not always the case. But this co-creation takes a lot of attention and time, but in the end is, in my opinion, the key that actually something that has been applied or implemented will be there in the far future still. Which requires a different kind of commitment from, for example, NGOs than having the quick wins of, for example, building something and leaving again.
So there needs to be a long-term commitment and collaboration.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Could you please point out to me which is the key finding that you learned in your projects on improvement of water, and how did you measure the success of this project?
Yeah, I think one of the key insights, so I'm a civil engineer.
Yes.
So I'm an engineer, so I am maybe a believer also that technology can have an impact in the world. And I think one of the insights that I see recurrently is that this role that technology can play is not always clear. So you hear very often, for example, technology doesn't play a role. We already know how we have to treat our water. We know how to build a toilet and a sewer system, which is true. But I think the knowledge on how such system will sustainably be implemented in many different settings, this knowledge we do not have. And maybe the technologies that we have now are not the ones that suit the context. meaning that you have to take the context into account when you're designing a system. And I think any designer knows this, but somehow in water systems this is sometimes forgotten, and it's assumed that the technology that works somewhere would work anywhere, which is not true, not from a technical perspective, not from a socioeconomic perspective.
That's a very interesting insight. Thank you very much for the interview, Dr. Doris van Halem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.